I owned all four of these saws for almost 2 years, and I still grabbed the wrong one nearly every single time. I would reach into the drawer, pull out whatever felt right in my hand, start a cut, and then watch the line wander or feel the blade bind up halfway through. And every time, I blamed the saw. So I did what a lot of us do. I bought a nicer one. Same wandering line, same bind. The honest truth is that nobody ever handed me the one simple rule that tells you which Japanese saw to reach for before you ever touch the wood. That rule is what today is about. By the end you will have it, and I want you to stick around all the way to the finish, because right before I sign off, I am going to show you the one thing that cut what I spend on saws down to almost nothing. Here is my promise for the next several minutes. I am going to walk you through 4 saws, and for each one, I am going to show you the single cut it was built for and the single cut it is genuinely bad at. That second part matters more than you think. Most guides just hand you a list of 4 names and turn you loose. A list does not help you at the bench at 8 in the morning when you have a board clamped down and 1 saw in your hand. A decision rule does. So we are not making a list today. We are building a rule, 1 line at a time, and by the end you will be able to reach into the drawer without looking and come out with the right saw. No judgment on the fumbling, by the way. I did all of this the slow way for longer than I would like to admit. Let me give you a little context on where I am coming from, because it changes how you hear everything after this. I spent about 20 years in Western power tool woodworking, table saw, miter saw, a shop full of screws and pocket hole jigs. I could build a cabinet in an afternoon, and I did, and half of them are in a landfill now because the fasteners let go and the repair wrecked the wood. Then I picked up a real Japanese pull saw for the first time, tried to cut a simple joint, and I felt like a beginner all over again. And I mean that as the best thing that ever happened to me. So everything I am about to tell you comes from my own bench, my own ruined boards, and a lot of cuts I got wrong first. Saw number 1 is the Ryoba. The word just means double-edged, and that is exactly what it is. 1 long blade with teeth on both edges. 1 edge is filed for ripping, which means cutting with the grain along the length of the board. The other edge is filed for cross-cutting, which means cutting across the grain through the width. You flip the saw over depending on which way the wood runs. This is the do-everything saw, and if a friend told me they could only own 1 Japanese saw to start, this is the one I would put in their hands. I built an entire small tool cabinet using nothing but a Ryoba for a full weekend, both the long rip cuts down the sides and the cross cuts for the shelves, and it never once felt like the wrong tool. Here is the cut it is built for. General work. You have a board, you need to break it down to rough length and width by hand, and you want 1 saw that does both jobs without a swap. The Ryoba is that saw. Now here is the cut it is bad at, and this is the part nobody tells you. The Ryoba has no spine, no stiffener along the back, so the blade can flex a little under pressure. For breaking down stock, that flex is nothing, you never notice it. But when you try to cut a dead flush, dead straight joint, a dovetail or a fine shoulder, that little flex is the difference between a joint that closes tight and a gap you can see daylight through. I tried to cut my first set of dovetails with a Ryoba because it was the saw I had, and the tails came out fat on one side and thin on the other, and I sat there thinking I had no talent for hand tools. It was not me. It was the wrong saw for that one job. So write down the first line of our rule. General ripping and cross-cutting goes to the Ryoba. Saw number 2 is the Dozuki. The name refers to the spine, that stiff strip of steel folded over the back of the blade, and that spine is the whole story. Because the back is braced, the blade underneath can be made shockingly thin, thinner than a dime, and it stays dead straight while you cut. This is the joinery saw, the dovetail saw, the saw you reach for when the cut has to be perfect and the wood is going to show. I cut a set of through dovetails with a proper Dozuki after struggling with that Ryoba, same hands, same skill level, and the pins dropped into the tails on the first try with a tap. The saw did that, not me. Here is the cut it is built for. Fine, shallow, dead straight joinery where the surface will be seen. Dovetails, tenon shoulders, small precise work. And here is the cut it is bad at, and it is built right into that beautiful spine. The spine that keeps the blade straight also acts like a wall. When your cut gets deep enough that the spine reaches the top of the wood, it stops. It bottoms out. You physically cannot push the saw any deeper. On a joint that is 1 inch tall, that is no problem at all. But the moment you need to cut through a board that is taller than the distance from the teeth to the spine, the dozuki simply cannot finish the job. So the second line of our rule is this: fine joinery, where it shows, goes to the dozuki. If you are enjoying these old methods and you want them all in one place, I put together a book called Kenji's Workshop, 100 Ancient Eastern Woodworking Secrets for the Modern Craftsman. It is where I collected the master's tips, the little shortcuts that used to take an apprentice years to earn, and it gives you a Western wood substitute for every species I mention, so you are never stuck hunting for something you cannot buy locally. If that sounds useful, the link is in the description below. Now let us get to the saw that solves the dozuki's one weakness. Saw number 3 is the kataba. The word means single-edged, and that name is the clue to everything. The kataba has teeth on one edge only, and here is the important part: it has no spine on the back at all. Remember the wall that stopped the dozuki cold. The kataba does not have that wall. So the kataba can keep cutting straight down through a board as deep as the blade is wide, right through thick stock that a dozuki could never finish. I keep a kataba on the wall specifically for cutting tenons on legs and posts, the kind of deep cheek cuts that run 2 inches or 3 inches down into the wood, and a dozuki would jam against its own spine a third of the way through. Here is the cut it is built for: deep cuts, thicker stock, anything where the dozuki would bottom out. And here is the cut it is a little worse at, and it is a fair trade. Without that stiffening spine, the kataba blade has a touch more flex than a dozuki, so for the very finest, most delicate joinery, the dozuki still gives you slightly better control. It is a small difference, and most of the time you will never feel it, but if you are chasing a perfect dovetail, the dozuki wins by a hair. Think of it this way: the dozuki is the surgeon for shallow, showy cuts, and the kataba is the workhorse for deep ones. So the third line of the rule writes itself. Deep cuts that a dozuki cannot reach go to the kataba. Saw number 4 is the azabiki, and this one is strange looking the first time you see it, because it does something the other 3 physically cannot. The azabiki has a small, short blade with a curved cutting edge that bows outward. Every other saw we have talked about needs to start its cut at the edge of the board. The azabiki does not. That curved belly lets you set the teeth down flat in the middle of a wide panel, right in the center where there is no edge to start from, and begin a cut in the field of the wood. I use mine to start grooves and housings, those slots that a shelf sits into, and to plunge into the middle of a tabletop when I need to cut an opening that does not touch any edge. Try that with a ryoba, and the tip just skates and skips across the surface and leaves a scratch, because a straight blade has no way to bite in the middle of a flat board. Here is the cut it is built for, starting a cut where there is no edge, in the middle of a board, for grooves, housings, and plunge cuts. And here is the cut it is bad at, and it comes straight from that curved shape. The azabiki is not the saw for a long straight cut running out to the edge of a board. That short curved blade is built to start cuts, not to run them for a foot down a line. So the fourth and final line of our rule is this: mid-panel starts. Where there is no edge to begin from, go to the azabiki. Now before I hand you the finished rule, I have to give you the one habit that ties all 4 of these saws together, because if you get this wrong, you will blame the saw for something that was never the saw's fault. Every one of these is a pull saw. Western saws cut on the push stroke, so we all learn to lean into the wood and drive the saw forward, These cut on the pull. The teeth take the wood as you draw the saw back toward your body, and that is why the blades can be so thin, because a blade being pulled cannot buckle the way a blade being pushed can. So the habit is this: let the saw track on the pull and never force it. Set the teeth in a light guide notch, then draw back with almost no downward pressure and let the saw find its own line. The very first day I used a pull saw, I pushed hard out of 20 years of habit, kinked a blade that cost more than I want to say, and blamed the saw for being flimsy. It was not flimsy. I was using it backward. So if a cut ever wanders or binds, before you go buy another saw, check your stroke. Wrong technique gets blamed on the wrong saw more than anything else in this craft. Let me talk about the patterns I used to fall into, because I fell into every one of these, and you might recognize a couple of them. The first pattern was buying the Dozuki first because the dovetails in the videos looked so clean, and then trying to force it through deep cuts it was never built for, and cursing it when the spine stopped me. That was not the saw failing, that was me using a fine joinery saw for heavy work. The second pattern was treating the Ryoba as a finish saw and being disappointed when my joints did not close tight. The Ryoba is a breaking down saw, and asking it to do a Dozuki's job is like asking a framing hammer to set a finish nail. The third pattern was the one that cost me actual money. When my saw got dull, I assumed the whole saw was done, so I threw it out and bought a new one, again and again. I was treating a fine tool like a disposable razor. Hold that thought, because it leads straight into the last thing I want to give you. And the fourth pattern was the deepest one, forcing the stroke on the push, and then, judging the tool by cuts, my own hands had ruined. None of these mean you lack talent. They just mean nobody gave you the rule, and now you have it. So here is the payoff I promised you at the very start. The whole thing in 4 lines you can keep in your head every single time you stand at the bench. When the cut is fine joinery that will show dovetails and shoulders, you reach for the Dozuki. When it is general work, breaking a board down to rough size, ripping and cross-cutting, you reach for the Ryoba. When the cut is too deep for a Dozuki to finish, you reach for the kataba. And when you need to start a cut in the middle of a board where there is no edge, you reach for the azabiki. Joinery to the Dozuki, general work to the Ryoba, deep cuts to the kataba, mid-panel starts to the azabiki. That is the rule. That is the thing I did not have for 2 years. Read it once more, and it is yours for good, and you will stop guessing at the drawer. And now the bonus I told you to stick around for, the thing that changed how much money I spend on saws entirely. Most of these traditional saws come in a version called keiba, which simply means replaceable blade. The teeth on a Japanese pull saw are hardened so sharp that you cannot really file them at home the way you would an old Western saw. For years I thought that meant they were disposable, and I threw whole saws away. Here is what I did not know. On a keiba saw, the handle stays, and only the thin blade comes off. When the teeth finally wear out, you do not buy a new saw. You slide off the old blade and slide on a fresh one for around $12. And the handle you have grown used to lasts for decades. Think about that against the Western way. I used to spend easily $400 a year replacing cheap hand saws that dulled and got tossed. Now I keep 3 good handles on the wall and a small stack of replacement blades in the drawer, and my whole yearly saw cost is a handful of $12 blades. That is the same ethic that keeps a 1,400-year-old temple standing in Japan. Nothing precious gets thrown away. The worn part comes off, the good part stays, and the tool serves the next generation. Demountable, repairable, and cheaper in the long run, all at once. If you want the deeper version of everything we covered today, it is all in the book, Kenji's Workshop, 100 Ancient Eastern Woodworking Secrets for the Modern Craftsman. It has detailed photos with clear step-by-step instructions, and it carries you past saws into sharpening, joints, and finishes, so you can take these lessons off the screen and onto your own bench where they actually matter. You can scan the QR code on the screen right now to grab it, And if this is the kind of woodworking you want more of, follow along here at Master Kenji, where we keep bringing these lost Eastern methods back to the modern shop, one honest cut at a time. I will see you at the next bench.